Hello world, ABBA have released their first brand new album in 40 years and it's a stunner. Let's get this out of the way. Whatever criticisms I may have, it's still a beautiful album and I'd mark it at least 8 out of 10. I maintain, however, that had they released it in 1974 when their album Waterloo came out, it would not have catapulted them to the stardom that they eventually achieved. The people to whom this album is likely to appeal are those who are in their teens and 20s during ABBA's glory period of 1974 to 1982, and who are therefore in their 60s nowadays. This does count me out slightly, as I was but a wee tiny tot when, as kids, we clubbed together to buy my uncle the Arrival album, the one with the helicopter on the front. I'm now in my early 50s and can still appreciate some contemporary music. I can appreciate the album for presenting some beautiful music, albeit it's not contemporary. And why should we expect it to be? The oldest member of ABBA is actually 76 years old, so, put it in that context. And if anybody saw the Spitting Image caricature of ABBA's return, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So you'll actually find it if you search YouTube for Spitting Image ABBA are back, and you'll see it if you've not seen it before. It's brilliant. So anyway, let's have a look at the personnel on the new album. I am reading this, by the way, because I wrote a script. So let's have a look at the personnel then. Firstly, the songwriting team of Bjorn and Benny. Back in the 70s, they'd meet up in a little hut on a Stockholm island and strum the guitar and plinky plonk on the piano until they got the bare bones of a song and then refine it in the studio with a band. The girls would also have their input, hearing demos at home and offering their ideas. For example, Asta Manana in 1974 was a problem track until Agneta went into the studio by herself one day and sang it like her idol Connie Francis. From this, ABBA were able to record the version we now know and love. By 1980, e.g. from Super Trooper onwards, the songwriting roles of Benny and Bjorn were more delineated, with Benny writing primarily the music and Bjorn the lyrics. Nothing was set in stone, but Bjorn said that now that he was Benny's editor. E.g. Benny would come up with melodic phrases and Bjorn would decide if he could write lyrics to Benny's music. If Bjorn wasn't happy with Benny's music, he'd dismiss it, and vice versa. This would appear to be the case today with the Voyage LP, although it's more set in stone. Reading the album's sleeves notes, it seems like Benny wrote the music and Bjorn wrote the lyrics. Bjorn didn't even play his guitar on the new album. It seems his role was limited to songwriting and backing vocals, plus a role vaguely described on the album sleeve as associate producer. Back in the day, i.e. all the records from 1973 to 82, their engineer was Michael B. Tretov, known affectionately as Micke. Micke was probably the most trendy engineer Sweden had at that time. In the book ABBA by ABBA, he described how it might be that lots of happening bands at the time had a treble snap on the drums, and thus if he didn't record his clients like that, they'd seem old-fashioned. So, he was really concerned with them being trendy. And moreover, he was responsible for the huge instrumental sound that ABBA had in the 1970s, similar to Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. During the recording of Ring Ring in 1973, he found himself wondering how to get a similar sound. He asked the instrumentalists to play their parts again, but on the sly, he increased the tape speed by an nth of a degree. It could have been a very expensive mistake, but the result was fantastic and it became a trademark of ABBA's songs throughout the 1970s. Another example is that when they were recording on 24 track in the 1970s, each person, Benny, Bjorn and Micke, would assume control of 8 faders each during mixdown. During Mamma Mia, someone forgot to fade up the tracks during the chorus, leaving the girls and a few synthesizers playing. This sounded great and would be the sound of the song we all adore. According to Wikipedia, Tretov stopped working in 2015 and thus wouldn't be available for Voyage. It's a shame because an active Michael B. Tretov would probably still have his ear to the pulse and produce a slightly more contemporary sound that's more acceptable for today's sort of 30-somethings. Other musicians: Benny Andersson, piano and synthesizers. Around about 1980-ish, Benny procured a Yamaha GX1. It looked like a home organ, as then made by Casio and Technics and Yamaha and a million others, e.g. 2 or 3 keyboard consoles and a foot pedal console, but it was far more technical. It cost roughly £45,000 in 1980, e.g. £197,000 in 2021. Although Benny had always made copious use of synthesizers, the acquisition of the GX1 saw the list of band members dwindling in the early 80s, so that by the time of the day before you came, you've just got synthesizers and a few drum machines. Benny still has a GX1 in his synthesizer collection nowadays. It's a prominent sound on Super Trooper and The Visitors, and he's used it and similar sounds on post-ABBA projects such as Chess and Story of a Heart. Even if he hasn't sampled the Yamaha GX1 for Voyage, it seems like he's used very similar sounds. To illustrate how much ABBA dispensed with musicians, replacing them with synths, the song Dancing Queen from 1976 was the last time ABBA used a string section. Until now, that is, because the Stockholm Concert Orchestra played on Voyage. The sleeve also tells us that Per Lindvall played drums and Lasse Wellander played guitars. The former played drums on The Visitors, and the latter played guitars on a lot of ABBA's 70s and 80s songs. So thankfully there is a thread of the original ABBA session musicians playing on Voyage, but critically we have no Michael B. Tretov engineering. I seem to remember that he'd had a stroke a few years ago, so we can't really blame him for not working on Voyage. So the songs then. I still have faith in you. This reminds me of the way old friends do, in that ABBA are singing about the unbroken bond between them, regardless of divorces, etc. The lyrics are really beautiful, and I love the way that the rock-styly band comes in and ABBA affirm their joy to be with one another. Will You Dance With Me? This song reminds me of The Piper, B-side of Super Trooper from 1980. Whereas The Piper contained tension between the minor key verses and the major Nordic Celtic choruses, Will You Dance seems to be a major key romp all the way. After a few plays, get the words in front of you and sing along. You'll be surprised how catchy it is. Although it's ultimately a pastiche, i.e. a pretend version of an Irish dance, pastiches were fashionable in the late 70s, but hardly a thing in 2021. Nevertheless, for us untrendy people, it's a good song and very prevalent of ABBA circa 1980. Little Things. Please, no. I really find Christmas so triggering for my mental health. No, I actually do. I really have a problem with Christmas time. So this is my own prejudices coming through. You'll probably quite like it, but, you know, this is my prejudice. So, yeah, I hate Christmas. I wish they hadn't included this song here. I suspect that a lot of people who play this album digitally at other times of the year will program their musical equipment to skip this track. I wish they'd either written a different song or revamped another undeleted track, such as Just Like That, and released this song as a standalone single at Christmas. I get that, as Bjorn said, they wanted to own Christmas and New Year, but every ABBA album has a Bjorn rock and roll workout. Why couldn't we have had one of those instead? You know, we need a Rock Me or a Does Your Mother Know? Don't Shut Me Down. I think this is the strongest ABBA song, in quotes, on the LP. After the Benny Andersson orchestra-style solo vocal at the beginning, because, yeah, that bit could have been sung by Helen Hjerholm. It sounds like One of Us to me, with its bass pattern and all, and those lovely sort of, that groove. It's really quite similar to One of Us. The lyrics are Bjorn at his best, most storytelling. The sentiments are a bit like As Good As New. After you've played the album a few times, it's this song that returns to your head like an earworm. Just an Ocean. Controversy ahoy! You'll doubtless know that this is an old song from 1978, recorded during sessions that culminated in the 1979 Voulez-Vous album. The vocals are those from 1978, but Benny made a new backing track for Voyage. You can hear a snippet of the original on the undeleted track on the Thank You for the Music box set. According to the press releases, Bjorn couldn't understand why the song wasn't released at the time. It was complete, and he praised the vocal track in particular. I hate to sound like Smart Alec, but I actually have a pretty good idea of why it wasn't released in 1978. It was far too old-fashioned. The late 70s were a time of punk and disco and heavy funk. In the context of Summer Night City, Voulez-Vous and If It Wasn't for the Nights, a song that begins with a bar of Remember You're a Womble and carries on in the chunga 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 vein would flop. It wasn't even used as a B-side. Summer Night City's B-side was a folk medley that, even though it was recorded in 1975, still stood its ground in 1978. The B-side of Chiquitita was Lovelight. Lovelier. Lovelight. A far more contemporary song for 1978 to 79, even though the recording itself was subject to a fair few gremlins. The lyrics to Just a Notion are also a bit stilted in English. My particular gripe is the word thereon. It's all a bit formal and legalistic, and its primary meaning is actually on it, which they don't mean. Everything from on it would be fine. No, doesn't make sense. Okay, the prince lifted his head and a crown was placed thereon. It can mean immediately after. The criminal was subjected to a trial and the verdict delivered thereon, i.e. immediately after. Something happened immediately after. You don't say from there on. It's not English. And it's such an easy solution as well. They simply mean everything from then on would be right. But, you know, it is stilted English. The quality of those lyrics is not the same as the quality of the lyrics that ABBA usually released, and also that they've, you know, obviously written the new songs. And, you know, the lyrics to Don't Shut Me Down and the lyrics to Just a Notion are just a million miles apart. Okay, but none of it matters now. ABBA are not trying to be current or trendy. They're just making the music they want to. If this came on at a party, the gang would be up and dancing. The youngsters would think, oh yeah, the 70s were great, and the older ones would just be basking in nostalgia. Objectively, it's a good song then. Just that in the context of ABBA's output in 1978, it was a step backwards. I Can Be That Woman. A gorgeous near solo from Agneta. There's just a few backing vocals from Frida in the chorus. It's a bit of a nod to country and western, which they've done before. You'll even hear typical country steel guitar in Take a Chance on Me if you listen hard enough. Although the lyrics are a bit morose, this is par for the course for country and western. There's a side of me that finds the tragedy of it all very funny. They've even included the dog in their domestic squabbles. And the dog is named after Tammy, as in Tammy Wynette. So very nice indeed. I really like it. I think that's a brilliant song. Keep an Eye on Dan. It's another brilliant song, but this one really is tragic. By the time the girls have sung about pulling over and thumping the steering wheel in despair, I just want to get the revolver out of the bedside cabinet and shoot myself. Musically, it's a restrained kind of disco beat. I'm reminded of Gimme Gimme Gimme. And it's also a nod at another song, which I'm not going to mention as it's a spoiler. But the last two bars of the song give the game away. Yeah, another really strong track. I won't tell you what my friend Rudolph sent to me about it, because I'd be arrested. Bumblebee. I get hundreds of emails from change.org and Avaz nagging me to sign petitions to save the bees. And now ABBA are at it as well. This ballad from Frida is not a resurrection of Free as a Bumblebee from Undeleted, as people have been speculating. I quite like it, and Frida has given a name to a few climate change projects, so I think the song is right up her alley. I think she'd have enjoyed singing it. No doubt about it. Another quintessential ABBA rock and roller. I think this song would be right at home on the ABBA LP from 1975. From what I've seen on social media, it's one of the contenders as favourite song on the LP, but it's not mine. Mine is actually Ode to Freedom. This is just sublime. In the intervening 30-odd years between The Visitors and Voyage, Benny and Bjorn have developed their abilities to write for classical orchestra and choir. This song sounds like it could have been lifted right out of Christina. I almost expect a narrator to come on and tell us about a rice pudding that she'd cooked for the village fair. No. Don't mind me. I'm just an old man. I love the lyrics about the vague concept of freedom. If this is ABBA's last ever album, as Agneta, Bjorn and Benny have all implied, their parting shot is an absolute gobsmacker. I really adore it. Finally, some notes about the quality. I don't really buy CDs anymore, but this is available on CD, LP and even cassette, as I was informed on Instagram the other day. Obviously it's available on streaming platforms, and I think the latter is, as usual, a bit compressed. I don't think it does Don't Shut Me Down the favours that listening to it on LP does, for example. But the yellow vinyl record that I received is very clean and quiet and surprisingly dynamic. So an album that takes time to grow on you, but play it a few times and it's like an old friend that you've known forever. 8 out of 10. This is my copy of it. Someone said to me on Twitter, oh, you've got the Amazon version. I wasn't aware that Amazon had their own edition of any LP, really. I think it's a bit dangerous, really, that, you know, Amazon have that much reach over the market that they can afford to have their own version of it. But that's, I don't know whether that's the case, but certainly this one doesn't have a sticker on it. The ones that I've seen photos of on the internet, they have like the first ABBA album for 40 years or something stuck there, but mine didn't have that, not even on the shrink wrap. So it's a gatefold. Here we have the avatars. We are the avatars. And list of session musicians, track listing, and the lyrics. I remarked on Twitter the other day that the last 3 ABBA albums from the 80s, i.e. Super Trooper, The Visitors and The Singles, and now ABBA Voyage, they're all brown. And even Gold was brown. So yeah, yeah. Anyway, yellow vinyl. Yeah, and it actually looks quite nice, and yeah, plays very well. You also get with this, in this part of the sleeve, a poster which I'm not going to open out, and you get somewhere down here. I can get it out, matron, a postcard of the band at the piano, abbavoyage.com. There we go. Right. That's the end of my review then. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye. Remember what a womble you are.